How's it going, everybody? It's Chris with a Brush of Knowledge. So today we're going to be talking to you about how you can get out of living paycheck to paycheck and what you can do to set yourself up to be saving money and building for retirement. This comes from a bit of experience. A couple of months ago, I was actually still living paycheck to paycheck, and within the last year, I've turned it around, paid off all my debts, and started living by budgeting at least 20% of all the stuff that I make into an investment account and making sure that I was setting myself up for a successful future. So we're going to talk about how you can do that and what you can do to get to this point as well. So for the first thing that you want to do is you need to make yourself accountable. Hold yourself accountable for the money that comes in and goes out of your account. Basically, what you need to do is you need to write down every transaction that happens in your debit accounts, in your credit cards, and everything, and just list them out one after another. Figure out what you spend on each thing. So if it's food expense, the grocery bill, take all of those grocery bills for an entire month and add them up together and figure out where your money's going. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to even start to do this, because if you don't know where your money's going, then you're basically helpless. The way to do this is to, every single morning, as soon as you wake up in the morning, put down exactly what you spent the next day onto a piece of paper. I like to have a notebook. It's actually right here. So I take this notebook and I write down every transaction that I spend and all the money that I make, and I put it down just in jot form so that I can just do a running tally at the end of every month. And that helps me remember what I spent my money on, as well as make sure that I know that I'm going beyond my budget or not reaching my budget if I have some leeway somewhere. So that brings us into step number 2. So the second step that you're going to need to do if you want to stop living paycheck to paycheck is to actually write down all of your revenue, everything that you make, and then all of your expenses next to each other, and create a budget from this. So I'm not talking about going right down to the T in what you're going to spend on your grocery bill, because for a lot of people, that doesn't work. Some months you're going to be spending more on groceries, some months you're going to be spending less. So what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you have a place for every dollar. And if there is one account that's a little bit lower, you can take some money from that account and put it into your grocery bill, or vice versa. I'm not talking about your investment account though. Your investment account has to be completely separate from this. You have to put that 20% into an account that's going to be growing and working for you. That's just for your retirement and for your lifestyle. And that there's no compromising that. You can't just not put in money into that. That is the key to not living paycheck to paycheck, is to always be investing. So for your budget, I want you to write down, go into detail as well. I want you to write down what you spend on food, your car, all your insurance costs, so your gas and everything like that. And then I want you to write down and figure out every single transaction you make and put it into a list. If there's only one charge per month, you can make a miscellaneous expense column, put the stuff in there. That's fine as well. No big deal at all. What this will do is you'll be able to look at that number and figure out every single day if you're spending more or less, and change so that you're not spending as much the next day. So that leads into step 3, which is going to be keeping track of it all. So you have to keep up to date on all of these things. I know it's hard to wake up in the morning and want to just put down the expenses from last night, especially if you went out drinking or something like that. There was a big expenditure that came through. But that's a big part about being accountable, is you have to put those into a column, or at least do something that will allow you to remember that you went over or under your budget or your daily budget so you don't break your monthly budget. The next thing that you want to do with keeping track of everything, through keeping track of everything, you're going to figure out where you're spending too much money and where you don't need to be spending as much money. For me, a lot of actually where I was spending my money was eating out and drinking. So I started realizing that I was spending, it wasn't even a lot of money. It could be $3, $6, but it was every second day or third day that I'd be buying beer and just stupid things that were adding up very quickly. And at the end of every month, I was always short about $60 or $70 that I wanted to be putting into my investments that I didn't have anymore. And I was borrowing money to be able to put money into my savings so that I felt comfortable. But you need to stop doing this, hold yourself accountable, stop leveraging bad debt, and leverage your own time. What I mean by that is take the time, sit down and figure out what your expenses are, and stop spending so much money in those specific categories that you know are a lot higher than the rest of them. One way you can do this is if you notice that you're spending a lot on gas or on your transportation and you don't really need to be transporting yourself as much, what I did actually that helped me out a lot was I started carpooling with a coworker. I actually was driving him to work, so it wasn't as much me saving driving as much as just splitting the gas. And because I was doing a lot of driving for work, we had to drive about an hour every day to and from work. So that added up pretty quickly because I drive a larger vehicle. And once you're spending $100 every 2 weeks or so, that really digs into your pay, especially if you're a lower wage worker. And you want to keep those expenses as low as possible, especially if you're already living paycheck to paycheck and you want to figure out where you're going to find the money to invest in the future. It's a lot of the time, it's right there in your expenses. You can easily not buy that McDouble or a Big Mac if you're splurging. Personally, I didn't actually spend a lot of money on big ticket items. It was all small purchases that were very easy to kick the habit of, and subscription costs that were accumulating a lot more than I even paid attention to. You would be very surprised if you look into your account and realize, you know what, I'm spending $60 a month on subscriptions to random services. I had Audible, I had Spotify, I had Netflix, I had Hulu. All four of those things added up was $60. And when I actually deleted all of those accounts, the only one I actually did keep was the lowest one, which is Spotify. And that wasn't too hard for me to give $10 a month, especially since I was already saving another $50 every single month. And so I managed to move that $50 from my expenses into my savings. And that's where most of the $7,000 actually came from, was through those easy to make changes. One of the big things that I actually had to own up to when I was making my budget was that I owed thousands of dollars in debt that had a very high interest rate, and I wasn't able to make the payments because I was making smaller payments to each one of them to try to build up my credit score, but I wasn't able to get out of the debt entirely because there was always something new coming up that would make me want to borrow that money again. What I did was I wrote down exactly what I needed to spend money on every single month, whether that was credit card bills or all of that stuff. And I made sure that I focused on those accounts first because that led me to being able to save most of my paycheck. Now I'm actually saving about 50% of my paycheck because there isn't all those expenses that are coming up day to day, like credit card bills. And it's not even that the credit card bills and everything were more than I could handle, because if that was the case, I would have had to go through debt consolidation or something like that. And that's not what I ended up doing. I paid it all off myself. What I started noticing was when I wasn't paying attention to my credit cards and the transactions coming in and out of my account, I wasn't able to notice when there was withdrawals that were bouncing, and I was spending $40 a time every single time that they tried to take out money. I didn't actually even notice that some months it happened about 4 times in a row. The same credit card would try to process itself 4 times, and I would be left with a $160 charge on top of the credit card. So that made it so that I couldn't pay the credit card that month just because my paycheck was a couple of days late. What I did to stop that was I started postponing a lot of the payments that I needed to make until my paycheck dates so that I could get caught up, and then I was on track. Once I was caught up and most of the debts were starting to be paid every month, and there wasn't those late fees or account fees that were coming out of my account, it was a lot more maintainable because I was able to write down the exact balances that were being pulled from my account and making sure that I had the money for those expenses before they came out. That's a big thing to remember, is to always have a little nest egg or an amount saved up. A lot of people like Dave Ramsey call it an emergency fund. And it is just for that. An emergency payment that just comes up out of the blue. Could be medical costs, but for Canadians, there's not a lot of medical costs to begin with. So a lot of that ended up going towards immediate payments that needed to be done. And I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't start right away and start tracking every single dollar that came in and out of my account. Thanks for sitting around with me today. I know it's a little weird. I'm sitting in the garage right now, just testing out a little bit of lighting options. I actually set up one of my construction lights, and it's doing pretty good. I like the lighting so far. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button down below. Leave a comment, any questions or anything you want me to address in the next video. And hit that subscribe button if you enjoy the content today and if you want to be caught up with everything that comes out. There'll be a new video every 3 days. Look forward to seeing you there. Have a good day.